going down, everybody? It's your boy, That Guy Mile High, tuning back in for another reaction. This time we got people who got away with murder but confessed while dying. Like, that is wild, bro. Like, just that whole, like, just me putting those words together, I'm like, why would you, like, guilty conscience much? You know what I'm saying? You live your whole life, like, cool. But on your deathbed, you decided, like, oh, I need to get this off my chest. I need to get this off my chest before I go. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, before we get into that, man, let's go ahead and give the members a shout out, man. We got Gary Willis, My Hood Life, Nugget, Liz, Amy Jane Doe, Ryan Parks, Lynn, Mad Creeker, Driver Thoughts, Lynn Willow, Misty Summers, and Taylor. I think I said the other Lynn too as well. If I didn't, shout out Lynn. But yeah, man, shout out to all the members, everybody out there supporting the channel. You know, on the member level, we appreciate you. We give the shout outs every video, every live, just to show that appreciation. If you want to be a member, get a little bit of praise by your boy Mile High, go ahead and hit the join button down below. In my opinion, you won't regret it. You know what I'm saying? We got all sorts of stuff coming. We got discount codes coming. We got all sorts of cool things coming, man. So yeah, just go ahead and join. You won't regret it. But anyways, if not, just hit that subscribe button, that bell notification, and just join the mafia that way. You know what I'm saying? That's free 99. You dig what I'm saying? So anyways, let's get in this. Back to this crazy idea of just like getting away with something and then turning around like years obviously later talking about I did it. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense to me. So let's see what happened with this. Let's go. Shout out to Anna Horror Stories, too.
In what is probably the vast majority of cases involving murders, the guilty person is captured and brought to justice. This, of course, does not bring back the life that they stole, but it also allows the family of the victim to have a sense of closure. But what about those that actually managed to get away with murder? The following stories tell the tale of three incredibly evil people who got away with murder and never admitted to what they did until they were about to die. One victim was just...
That is such a hell of a way to get it, like, to just basically be like, oh yeah, I didn't do it, and just hold that like it wasn't me, I was proven innocent, it wasn't me, all the way, you know, living your happy life and shit, and then on the day that you about to, you know, leave this place, or right around the time you about to leave this place, you decide, you know what, now is the time. Like, I don't know if I would be more upset or if I'd be happy to have that type of closure, bro. Like, to know that you lived an entire full life, like, you know what I mean? And the only, like, had you not been on your deathbed, you wouldn't have said anything. Like, that's a cold psychological mind fuck right there, bro. Like, I feel like that's more of a mind fuck. That's like a last, like, middle finger to the people who, you know what I'm saying, who were the victims, like the families of these victims and shit. Like, that was a last fuck you, in my opinion, because you already got to live your life and do everything. Like, if you're on your deathbed, that means that, like, you know, obviously you got to live your life. You know, like, that's a cold game right there, bro. That's cold. That shit is cold, bro.
And another had
Oh
been
my
a long
God,
abuser
that's
before
crazy.
becoming a victim themselves. Still, others were simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was the evening of August 5th, 1989, and 14-year-old Gina Brooks of Fredericktown, Missouri, was enjoying the summer day by watching her brother's baseball game. She was a beautiful, blonde-haired, green-eyed teenager with her whole life ahead of her. After the game ended, she would return home for a little while, before later deciding she was going to visit her boyfriend. He only lived 6 blocks away. That evening, Gina had already told her mother, Sydney, goodnight, and Cindy had gone to bed. She told her brother she was going out before she left on her bike at around 10 p.m. that night. Many hours passed by and eventually it was 2 a.m. Cindy happened to wake up in the night and decided to go check Gina's room, only to find it empty. It was then that she realized Gina still hadn't come home. Her mother was understandably frantic and called the police to report her daughter missing.
Damn.
Police began combing through the town searching for any signs of her. Eventually, they found her bicycle, which was abandoned on the side of the road about 5 blocks from her house, but she was nowhere around. Police also began questioning local neighbors to try to determine where Gina was last seen. They eventually find out that Gina was last seen nearby a local church. She had been seen standing near her bicycle when 3 men in a blue station wagon pulled up alongside her. They had been following her. When they got out of the car to try to talk to her, she must have realized she was in danger because she hopped off her bike and took off. While it wasn't clear to those who witnessed this exactly what happened, some people, including Gina's boyfriend, heard screams and watched as the station wagon took off at a high pace towards the highway. The whole town came out to search day and night for missing Gina, and her family were desperate to bring her back home. They hung up posters, searched local caves and woods, but sadly were never able to find even a trace of the young girl who was set to start 8th grade not long after she disappeared.
Okay, hold up. Hold the front door. Okay, I thought I heard that the age was like 13, 14 or whatever. Like, and I was just kind of like, oh, you know, like I don't think it fully registered in my brain. Who in their right mind is letting their child at 8, 14, 15 years old leave and go 6 blocks up the street at 10 o'clock at night and you just going to sleep? Like, okay, sweetie, I'll see you when you get home. Like, what, nigga? Huh? Like, first, that's my, okay, no. Now I'm mad at the parents, bro.
Entire town, which
Who the
was very
fuck does
small,
I don't give a
only
damn
around
how small your town is. I don't give a, none of that matters to me. Bro, none of, bruh.
1,000 residents, was terrified and traumatized by this great loss. Year after year passed, and it appeared that this was going to be a cold case and that Gina's loved ones would never actually know what happened to her. But was this really the end of the story? Everything completely changed in September of 1996. There was a patient at St. Louis, Missouri hospital who was in the process of dying. He had not only had cancer but was suffering from complications from AIDS. He knew that his days were numbered. This patient was a man named Brian Squires. In his very final days, he admitted to some of the nurses that he had information about not only 1, but 3 brutal unsolved murders. He was behind the slaying of 9-year-old Angie Houseman, who disappeared in November of 1993. Angie was from St. Anne, a suburb of St. Louis. With the help of another man, Bryant kidnapped her right after she got off the school bus. Her brutally beaten body was found tied to a tree just 9 days after she was missing. She had been horrifically and left for dead. She eventually died of sun exposure, among other wounds. Bryant did not reveal who his accomplice was for this crime. Bryant did reveal that a man named Nathan Williams had been behind the other murders, though. He said in 1975, Williams, who was only 14 at the time, had killed a 23-year-old woman named Laura Dinwiddie. Laura was a good person who worked as a volunteer with inner-city children and taught them sign language. Her naked dead body was found in her apartment. She had not only been, but her throat was brutally Finally, Bryant revealed what actually happened to Gina that tragic night that would change her loved ones' lives forever. On the night of Gina's disappearance, he had been one of the 3 men in the station wagon that confronted the team. In fact, he had been behind the wheel. He claimed that the other 2 men with him were Nathan Williams and Timothy Bello. While working together, the men kidnapped Gina, her throat, and then disposed of her body. Not long after making these horrific confessions, Bryant...
You have to be so sick, bro, to just do shit like that. I just don't understand it, man. I just don't. You have to have, like, just some just wild stuff going on up here, in my opinion. Like, I just don't understand.
He would never have to pay for the horrible crimes that he committed. But what about Nathan and Timothy, who were still alive? Both of these men were arrested in 1999 in connection to Gina's murder. Timothy was hardly a first-time offender and had been in trouble with the law many times in the past, most commonly in connection with taking advantage of women. When questioned by police, Timothy didn't deny being connected to Gina's murder. He even described the supposed location of her body, which was a freezer on his father's vast 96-acre property. But while this area was searched thoroughly, police were never able to find Gina's remains. Tragically, Timothy's charges in connection to Gina's death would ultimately be dropped in 1999, and he would later be charged with lying to the FBI.
Oh, word.
The sentence he ended up receiving was only a measly 30 months behind
30
bars,
months.
which is about 2.5 years. As if this wasn't already unfortunate enough, the charges against Nathan Williams in connection to Gina's case were also dropped. Law enforcement simply didn't believe.
Damn, I was just about to say they didn't believe Brian's testimony because he was dying. There was no merit because you could say anything because you have nothing to lose, you have nothing to gain. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just a statement at that point. You know what I mean? Like there was no merit, they couldn't find anything to actually tie anybody together. So it just was what it was. You know what I mean? Yeah, that shit is unfortunate as shit, bro. Like super unfortunate. And again, this goes back to my original statement in the beginning where I was like, yo, that whole shit right there would be like a big F. You know how much like you'd be like feeling like, oh my God, we got closure. We found, the three men. One of them died, whatever, but he gave us enough information, which you thought at the time, or at least a confession to be able to go get the other two men that were in the situation and charge them. You know what I'm saying? At least get some sort of justification, not justification, but yeah, I guess you could say justification, whatever, but just justice. I think that's a better way to say it. So get some justice for Gina. You know what I mean? And that might really like be a way to, maybe start the healing process at that point. But again, there was no, he's on his deathbed, bro. It's like a big FU on the way out the door. It's a big FU on the way out the door.
Brian's deathbed confessions were the whole truth, and that Nathan could have been responsible for 2 different slayings. In fact, they even claimed that because Bryant had confessed to his nurses and not the police, his confessions were no longer valid.
See?
Additionally, the nurses hadn't come to the police to tell them about the confessions initially because they did not believe Bryant was actually of stable mind and telling the truth. However, Nathan would still have to pay for the other crimes he had been connected with, including having taken physical advantage of a little girl just a month after Gina's disappearance. He was also considered to be the person behind the disappearance of a 12-year-old girl named Tammy Surdom. Tammy of St. Charles, Missouri, disappeared during the beginning of August of 1975. Because Tammy was always running away from home, her family didn't report her as missing right away. But after she did not return home for a long period of time, her parents finally realized she had been the victim of foul play and notified the authorities. Nathan would later admit to not only kidnapping and taking advantage of young Tammy.
What, like, my thing is like, what are you doing to drive your daughter to leave, like, be, like, just want to run away from home? You know what I mean? Like, I just don't believe that, like, that little girl just had Tammy, well, she has a name. We won't say that Tammy just had this young, wild spirit and just wanted to leave the house. Like, no. Like something was driving and compelling that girl to leave her house. You know what I'm saying? Just like one of my younger sisters, for instance. Like she always she was one of those people who just she was very emotional. She was very like everything needed to kind of work in her favor. She was just she was angry, and a lot of it I think just comes from did things with her father that because he left, he didn't do anything really weird or nothing. He just had dipped out when she was super young, and it just always bothered her. And she was just kind of like this little lost little girl for a long time because she just didn't just know how to process a lot of stuff. And my mom wasn't really good at helping her process that, so it kind of made my sister try to find ways to just go and be with her friends. She would I remember when she was she was in kindergarten, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, she was in kindergarten. It was either kindergarten or first grade, but that was the first time that she had ever went to her friend's house and came she figured out how to manipulate this situation and came up with the perfect lies and everything to be able to go to her friend's house. I remember it just being a crazy big ordeal, but that was just the start of the situation of her just being this real just I don't want to say free spirit, but just like I said, just lost soul for a while. She was just kind of always wandering around and just kind of doing her own thing, man. So again, knowing kind of and seeing that from a personal perspective, it being my sister, again, I don't think that this young girl Tammy here was just like, obliviously just beep, 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 like there was something that was compelling her and driving her, even if it was as simple as just not feeling comfortable or welcome or at home where she was supposed to be home, like, you know what I mean. But anyway, let's go. My bad. That was just super crazy.
And burying her body.
Damn.
Her remains were never discovered.
That's
Despite
so
the
sad,
evidence
bro.
against him, Nathan has shockingly never actually been convicted of any murder. He did, however, get a sentence to a minimum of 30 years in prison in connection to his other charges.
Oh yeah,
he is currently in prison at Jefferson County Correctional Center.
Look, they couldn't get him for whatever they could, so they gave his ass. They wanted to get him for other stuff, but they couldn't. So whatever they could get him, his ass got the maxes. They were like, nah, player, maximum. You know what I'm saying? We giving you the maxes to try to make up for some of the shit we can't get you for. Yeah, they didn't want his ass on the streets. Fuck that. They were just trying to get him.
Geraldine Kelly, who went by Jerry, was quite simply not the average woman you would come across in the early 1990s. She was quite small and dark-haired, but she was also covered in tattoos, kept attack dogs as pets, and would even sometimes be spotted wearing an enormous boa constrictor around her neck. She was clearly not the type of person to be messed with, but what from her history would make her this way?
Or she was super insecure, and the dogs and the snakes and all that stuff was like her way of, like, preemptively intimidating people. You know how like some birds or animals and stuff will have super loud colors, not only for the fact of like mating purposes, but some animals, they're super loud colors because it's, a sign or warning sign, like I'm poisonous, or, I'll fuck you up, basically. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I kind of feel like that's the same kind of concept that's going on here with her. Like, it's a defense mechanism more than anything. And it's probably because she's got a crazy rough past, and this was like her way of making sure that she's never taken advantage of again.
Dean met her future husband, John Kelly, when they were both children. They went on to get married and later had 2 children, a daughter and a son. While things in their marriage may have started out okay, they took a turn for the worse in 1981 during a wedding one fateful evening. John had been drinking too much and ended up getting into a fight with some of the other wedding guests. While it's not clear exactly how it happened, the fight resulted in the death of his brother-in-law. John was terrified that he could be charged with murder, so he decided to pack up his family and move across the country. They settled in California, where he would land a job working at a motel. But during this time, he was still drinking heavily, and he and Geraldine would fight all the time, eventually causing their 2 children to move away and distance themselves from them. John was allegedly very abusive towards Geraldine for many years, causing her to become cold-hearted towards him. Eventually, the abuse became too much for her to bear, and she decided to take revenge upon her husband. She shot him dead and then placed his body in a freezer where it remained for more than 6 years. Of course, no one, including law enforcement or Jerry's own family, was at all aware of what she had done to John for many years. She told her children that their dad had simply died in a car, and they had no reason to doubt this story. After all, why would she lie to them? It wasn't until around 6 years later that Jerry, now dying from breast cancer, would decide to come clean about what she had done. She told her daughter about the details of her husband's murder, and her daughter would soon after notify the proper authorities. Police went to go check the freezer Jerry had described, and sure enough, they discovered the remains of her former husband. While he was found quite severely decomposed, his body was soon identified due to his very specific tattoos. By this point, Jerry had already passed, and it was already too late for her to serve justice for her husband's murder.
Bro, that is a big F you to her kids, his family. That was she might have had a guilty conscience for sure. There might have been a slight little bit of a guilty conscience on her, for sure. I ain't gonna lie. But that was still a big F you to everybody, bro, on the way out. Like, y'all, I'm out this bitch.
It was the year 1975, and 20-year-old Michael Mansfield was a student studying at Lincoln College. He was a hardworking student, but was unfortunately in a little bit of trouble with the law. He had been caught in the fall carrying stolen goods. The stolen items were record albums that he had been caught trying to dispose of in his dormitory. The district attorney decided to have mercy on him and cut him a deal. He said that he would drop all charges against him if he only turned in the person who sold him the goods. Michael agreed and would ultimately turn in 21-year-old Russell Smraker, which he knew would earn him his own freedom when he testified against him. That Christmas, Michael decided to return home to Rolling Meadow, Illinois. He spent the holiday with his parents and everything started out normal, but on the evening of New Year's Eve, he would leave home only to never be seen again. He was gone without a trace, and police had nothing to go off of. As time went on, it would eventually become a cold case. The following year, there would be another strange occurrence, but this time it was back in the city of Lincoln, Illinois, where Michael had been attending school. It was the morning of June 2nd, and 51-year-old Lincoln resident Ruth Martin hadn't arrived at work and hadn't called to tell anybody she wouldn't be coming in. This was very unlike her. Her co-workers were afraid for her well-being, so they ended up calling her husband Richard. Richard was already at work, but he quickly rushed home to check on his wife. It was there, in their own garage, that he discovered not only a bullet, but a blood stain. He searched the home from top to bottom, but there was no sign of his wife. Just like in the case of Michael, there were no signs pointing towards any particular suspect, and police had little to go off of. They did end up finding Ruth's car abandoned in a nearby city with additional blood in the trunk. Not long after, yet another tragedy would strike the city of Lincoln, which was already reeling from all the recent crime. It was October 9th, just a few months since Ruth's disappearance, and police received a 911 call. Gunshots had been heard ringing out in what was usually a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. They were called to the home of Jay and Robin Fry, who were both just 25 years old. They had both been down and at the time, Robin had sadly been pregnant with the couple's first child. Police, who now had tons of pressure to figure out who had committed these crimes, were trying to find a possible motive and a possible connection between Ruth Martin's murder and that of the Frys. All of these individuals were well liked and didn't have any known enemies, but eventually they would come to realize that both Jay Fry and Ruth Martin had an unusual connection that you certainly won't be expecting. Both Jay and Ruth were expected to testify against Russell Smraker. It all started with a petty incident at a grocery store where Jay worked. Jay had caught Russell stealing and ended up chasing him through the store and into the parking lot. In an effort to get rid of any evidence, Russell would end up throwing the stolen items into Ruth Martin's car. It was a package of steaks that cost no more than $4. Both Jay and Ruth were expected to testify against Russell for the incident, but they never got the chance to because he would take their lives, along with the life of Robin, who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what happened to Michael Mansfield, who was still missing? Police would eventually discover that Michael had also been expected to testify against Russell, but for a very different reason. He had disappeared before he ever got the chance. They now had a very clear suspect for all three of these crimes. Russell was soon after arrested and later convicted in connection to the murders. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison. Throughout the years, investigators would try many times to get him to open up about how exactly these slayings occurred, but he refused. It wasn't until he was dying at 56 years old in 2011 that from his deathbed, he finally confessed to the murders. While he couldn't or wouldn't answer where Michael Mansfield's body was, he did say Ruth Martin's body was buried under a highway that was under construction. Sadly, police were never able to find her body or Michael's remains.
Well,
Russell
obviously
would die soon after his confessions.
Well, that one right there was at least like I want to say interesting, but like they got him. You know what I'm saying? He served 2 life sentences. I mean, he didn't obviously serve 2 life sentences, but he got his time in jail. Like he was behind bars when he died. You know, it still kind of sucks that he didn't admit it until the end, but they knew enough to convict his ass. And you know, I feel like the families of that one particularly probably didn't have any they probably still hated him and had animosity for sure, but they probably were able to start the healing process a lot sooner. And really, when he probably said something, it was probably like, we already knew, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? They were probably, we already knew. That's why your ass was in jail. Shut up. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that one was probably like the nicest one. You know what I'm saying? Only because his ass was already in prison. The other ones though, that shit was some big FUs, and you know what I'm saying? Them was some FUs. But anyways, man, you let me know what you thought about that in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.